Now, I'm going to go actually to Ducati next because I want to save Yamaha for the end. But we're going to go to our constructors' winners. Ducati, of course, will have the most amount of bikes powered by them next season. This year, of course, they had Marini and Bastianini as part of their sort of VR46 Avintia team. And Marini, rookie season, best result of 5th in Austria, moves to officially VR46 in 2022. And Bastianini, another rookie, best result of 3rd. And he'll go to Gresini Racing for 2022. How did you make of the two rookies?
Well, Bastianini was outstanding. I think that Bastianini was bordering on brilliant. Marini had the kind of year that you might expect. But I think Bastianini was just, where'd it come from? It just goes to show you, doesn't it? Where Quartararo, won a Moto2 race. Well, 2 if you include the one I think he was disqualified from. And then came into MotoGP and shone. And Bastianini steps in and wow. And he looked bloody good on it all the time as well. Ducati deserve to win the Constructors' Championship. I mean, they have been innovative, they have been clever, they put their money and effort into developing their bikes within the rules during the course of a year where it's been difficult from that point of view because of the tech freeze on motors and so on and so forth. There are a lot of things you can't do when a motor has got technical constraints, but they've worked their way around those motorbikes. I would say that there's going to be a lot of worried manufacturers next year. But again, the rules are probably wide enough for somebody very clever to come up with something again, just that little bit of a surprise. And, people like Suzuki, they're not dim. They're sitting back there working on some really interesting stuff. And, Suzuki might just come up with it. Okay, they've only got 2 bikes and Ducati got 8. Maybe they'll be spread too thinly, Ducati, for their developments for next year. We'll wait and see, but I think they deserve the Constructors' Championship, the Manufacturers' Championship, purely and simply because they have been absolutely brilliant. They've also been brilliant the way they've managed their riders, which comes down to the teams thing. I mean, Bagnaia in the closing half of the closing third of the season has been just, honestly, and anybody not got him as the man to beat next year? He's top of my list.
You've just got to say, Ducati, brilliant year, as you say, but once again, they're still waiting for this World Championship, aren't they? It's still, this only championship is Casey Stone in 2007. It just something, how many times they finished second now? They've had 3 times with Dovi, now they've had Bagnaia. As you say, Keith, you've got to imagine on paper that next year they're the favourites, but at the moment, something seems to happen, doesn't it? But it's hard to look beyond them, at the moment. That dominant finish to the season, incredible. I guess the only surprise really was that I think they expected Jack Miller to lead their challenge this year, didn't they? Now, I find Jack really difficult to sum up his season because when he was signed at the start of 2020, which didn't happen because of COVID, he was sort of Petrucci's replacement, wasn't he? And so he was sort of the number 2 next to Dovi, and then Dovi left, and you found Jack suddenly became the number 1, and Bagnaia came in, and Bagnaia was in competition with Zarco, remember? If you look at Jack's performance, 2 wins, first wins in the dry against Petrucci, it was a good season. But then you look at what Bagnaia did, and suddenly you think, wow, he's under pressure there. And I think Bagnaia just outperformed all expectations this year, didn't he? And if he carries on like that, if he picks up where he left off, not just at the end of the racing season, but the end of the test as well in Jerez, he's going to be tough to beat, and certainly he's riding this wave of confidence. And as you say, Ducati, technically, they seem to have all of these parts in line for a bike that is already, as Bagnaia says, nearly perfect. So, the others have got to be worried. And again, to go back to bang on about the 2023 contracts, there's going to be some riders that go, I'd like to be on that bike in 2023.
Jack Miller, I think, is the way that Jack Miller goes about his business. He's tough. He's funny. He's the kind of guy that you would make the mistake of thinking that he's a bit too casual. But underneath all of that is a guy that's quite calculating as well. And he'll be working on what went wrong during the course of this year. I'm fairly sure of that. I think Jack Miller will be back with a bit of a bang next year. Not having a team leader all of a sudden and finding yourself as a team leader, if you like, sometimes is a bit tricky. Ducati is a good family. They'll nurture Jack, and I think Jack will be back with a bit of a bang next year. I've got a feeling for Jack as well. But will he beat Bagnaia? you know what it always comes down to? It comes down to who gets the first injury. You know, by the time we get halfway through the season, every one of these riders has had an injury of some kind or another through either testing or racing. And, there's a certain amount of luck that comes into that. So factor that in when we're making our decisions, maybe.
Well, yeah, you talk of injury, and I suppose we've covered the top Ducati team and we've covered the bottom Ducati team. Let's cover the middle, Pramac, and Jorge Martin, Johann Zarco. Martin, rookie of the year, but did have that huge injury which saw him miss quite a few rounds, but still able to come back from that. And you imagine straight away, still in recovery mode, but still looking and showing some strong form. On the other side, Johann Zarco, he was my champion. I got that one wrong, but he certainly looked like he was the only one in the early part of the season that was really, challenging Fabio Quartararo to begin with, but then faded away in the second half. Best result of second in the end, didn't get a win on the board. But Pramac, a strong lineup it seems they've got there though.
Yeah, I think good and bad for Jorge. I mean, unlucky for him, obviously, early on, and he did come back well from that. So I'm not even going to really talk much about him because next year is a new year and he'll be looking forward to it. Zarco, I still think underperformed, as obviously you do as well, because you picked him for the year. But it's one of those situations with Zarco. There's a man who thinks sometimes a little bit too much, I get the feeling. Sometimes you can just shut that bit of your brain off that does the thinking and keep the other side that does the riding. He's a very, very good motorbike racer, but could you ever see him winning a world championship or being able to threaten for one? I can't. It just strikes me that, he'll have a good ride, then he won't have a good ride. And it's kind of, he's a unique personality and he's great for the paddock, but would you put money on him? Other than you, Harry, no.
Thank God I didn't put any real money on him.
What do you mean? I thought you've got money on the table, Harry.
Maybe next year. Maybe next year we'll up the ante. But Pete, would you agree with those sentiments?
I think it was such a split year, wasn't it? At the end of the first 7 races, when he got all of his podiums, he did look like a championship contender. And then it just suddenly stopped. And it was so strange because we're just talking about Bagnaia's end of season being so great. He really went upwards and Zarco went downwards on the same bike. Did something happen with this, that suited other riders? I mean, who knows? There was never really a clear explanation, a bit like with Oliveira, as to why there was this sort of massive drop in points during the second half of the season for Zarco and Oliveira. They were the two guys that really lost out compared to earlier on in the year. And yeah, it was Zarco's best year. You can say that much. I mean, it was Pramac's highest position in the championship. But when your teammate's a rookie and he wins a race, Zarco needed to win, didn't he, this year? I think everything was there, and it would have made such a difference for him going into this new year if he was already a MotoGP winner, having tried for so long. He was a champion in Moto2. If he can revive that consistency, who knows? Can he do it? But yeah, you've got to believe that momentum is with Jorge Martin, and Zarco needs to, as he says, he's going to try and look at what Bagnaia is doing, the way that he's riding the Ducati, and incorporate some of that, because that's clearly the way forward. Bagnaia has shown if you can ride the bike with so much faith in the front of the bike as he has, the speed you can have can be untouchable. So Zarco's job is to try and get on terms with the best guys on that bike.
It's always quite amusing when you hear that, I think, because the psychology and the riders are tired by the time you get halfway through the season. It's a tough, tough, tough year. And the psychology of seeing youngsters come and go faster than you, again, we've all had it. Sorry, I've got to go back to 1987, South African series on production bikes. We all flew down there for this series that Mick Grant had put together. We never did get paid, by the way. Mick, you still owe me 800 quid. But the point being is that there was a young Mick Doohan. I just won a British Championship, the 87, whatever it was. And Doohan and I were both running FZ 750 Yamahas. And chest feathers out. I'm the fastest guy on an FZ in the world. And then about 3 laps in, I got my arse handed to me by Mick Doohan, who was about 16 at the time. And I'd never quite seen anything like it. And I couldn't get back on terms with that. And I still don't know to this day how much of that was psychological and how much of that was down to the motorcycle. It couldn't have been down to the motorcycle. We were riding the same motorcycle. And it brings you down in a way that you can't work your way around your own problems. You suddenly start to focus on something else rather than what you should be focusing on is yourself. obviously Doohan went on to prove just what a massively talented man he was. But back in the day when he was raw, sat in the corner of a stinking bloody, pit garage in the middle of nowhere in South Africa to win the series. Spectacular. I think Zarco will have the same problems next year as he's had this year. Doesn't matter what he does with the bike. You hear it all the time. Repsol Honda, who could ride a motorbike like Marc Marquez? Nobody. Cal Crutchlow used to say, I've got all the data. I can see what he's doing. I know exactly what he's doing with the motorbike and how he's doing it and what his setup is, which will be the same with Zarco. He'll be able to see what Bagnaia's got and doing with his bike. But making yourself do it, Cal used to come back in and say, I'd just crash if I rode it like Mark does. And quite often did. But that is the story, I'm afraid, that motorcycle riders make the difference to these bikes. If we make the analogy with perhaps Formula One, if you stick a fast guy in the fastest Formula One car, he will inevitably win, which is one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to Hamilton and George Russell next year. George Russell had that opportunity in the Mercedes and was faster than everybody, despite a puncture and a cocked-up pit stop by Mercedes at the time. So maybe, in bikes, the rider makes the difference. You can be on the same bike, same stuff, have all the data that you want from everyone else around you. And Zarco will have 7 other sets of data to look at for next year. But what it does do in the end is fry your brain on a bike, trying to work your way around it from bits of paper and graphs on screens. At the end of the day, it's you've got to do the job. You've got to make the difference. And right now in Ducati, it's Bagnaia that's doing that.
Absolutely. Well, at the end of it all, I suppose, Zarco ended 5th, Jorge Martin 9th, and then in the junior team, I suppose, or the rookie team, it was Luca Marini 19th, Bastianini 11th, and they took their team to 8th in the team standings, and of course Ducati 1st in the teams, Jack Miller 4th, Bagnaia 2nd in the end after that crash saw Quartararo take the championship, but he really was the challenger in the end. Let's finish then our team rundown with 2nd in the constructors.